Hello and welcome. Thank you so much to all of the people around the world, literally around the world, joining us for this amazing conversation today. We got people from India, Germany, Iran, Turkey, USA, Canada, Stockholm, Sweden, and we got some special guests that are also calling in from across the world. It ain't just me here in Portland, Oregon. But before we get going, let me introduce myself. I am Dana Lawson, CTO of Netlify, and I will be talking with three amazing panelists today about the future of AI and agent experience and how we got here. And are you ready? But before we get going, a little housekeeping. That's right. Please refer to our code of conduct and keep it nice, keep it civil, keep it fun in this chat. And if not, you're out. No, seriously, we're here to have a good time, and I hope you are too. With that being said, we have closed caption enabled. So if you need it, just go click that button and it is there for you. And so as we get into it, let's just take a quick moment for this amazing panel to introduce themselves. So let me sling it over to these guys over here. Matt, why don't you start?
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Biilmann. I'm CEO and co-founder of Netlify. Since we're hosting this podcast, a lot of us probably know something about Netlify. We are a web development platform that helps developers build, deploy, and operate front-end sites, web applications, e-commerce, whatever. Started Netlify about 10 years ago, right when the web was sort of being built with big monolithic applications as the core architecture you would build around WordPress, Drupal, Sitecore, stuff like that. And thought that if the web were to really be competitive and if we really wanted the open web to succeed, we had to sort of help shift to an architecture where you could build the actual web experiences separate from all your backend and business logic and API layers with pure web technologies and with web teams working on those. Coined this term Jamstack back in the day and built Netlify to make the developer experience of adopting this Jamstack architecture so good that it would become like a really common paradigm for building for the web and thus helping making the open web better. And that was sort of 10 years ago now, and we've sort of broadly seen this Jamstack architecture went out to a degree where by now most people just think about it as like how you do modern web development, right? Like you use modern front-end frameworks, JavaScript, TypeScript, you build decoupled front ends, you talk to all these serverless APIs and services. And now I think we're sort of seeing the next big moment of change across the whole industry and the web, where AI in the next years is going to be really changing what platforms we interact with the web on, the ways we interact in the digital world. And it's going to introduce the concept of agents as a big part of how we interact with products and companies and how we build software and so on. I've been thinking a lot about how Netlify fits into that and how we need to make the agent experience of building for the web better, with the same purpose of like making sure that the open web stays the best platform to build on, to interact with, and to drive the digital world forward. So that's a little about me, and I'll hand it over to Eric for your intro.
Awesome. Yeah, stoked to be here. Also, Dana, I think you are the most energetic and like engaging CTO I think I've ever met in my life.
Hey man, I need you to put that on LinkedIn, you know, so everybody knows that fun and energetic CTO.
I was like in the skills section.
I need that in the skills section. I mean,
I'll endorse you. I
need you to endorse you. But hey, Eric, I need to endorse you for something too. Like,
What's
is
that?
it true? Is it true? And I know you've been asked this 1,000 times, but we got a lot of people on this call. Is it true you're the dude that snuck into the AOL campus and lived there for 2 months and didn't get caught while you're trying to build your crazy startup? Because that's some internet lore. I'm up here in Portland, Oregon, and we believe in cryptozoology, like Bigfoot, and I thought this was one of them stories. But Eric, is it true? Before we get into telling the people why you are so invested in this, you got to clarify this one for me, man.
That was me. It was me. To be fair, it was me of long ago. That was like 2012, I think. Oh my gosh, almost like 13 years. Yeah, a long time ago. So yeah, that was like kind of the, I first moved out to Silicon Valley and was building my first startup. And if you Google AOL squatter, you can like read the story about this. But I lived in AOL's headquarters illegally for a few months, bootstrapping my company because I was broke. I was living on like $1 a day, and yeah, so it's kind of a fun start to my entrepreneurial journey. And for a long time, I was like, man, I hope I have to do something that's more notable than this, because I was like known as like the AOL squatter guy. And fortunately, like, these days, people are like, I'm like the Stackblitz guy, the Bolt guy, and then people are like, wait, you're also that guy, the AOL guy. So it took me almost 15 years to kind of clear, make my name, my future tombstone to say something other than AOL squatter. But and so yeah, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Stackblitz. I think most people at this point know us for our product Bolt.new. If you haven't heard of Bolt.new, it is, imagine like ChatGPT, but with like a dev environment built into it. So you can just like type in text, say, I want a full stack, web app, whether it's a CRM or even something simple like for my wedding website. You hit enter, it like kind of magically generates an actual application. You can keep prompting it, you can keep editing it. And you can even deploy as well. And so when you click deploy, it automatically deploys into Netlify. If you haven't tried this, you should like do it. It takes 60 seconds to do everything I just said.
Right now.
Yeah. Put us in one window, and then and just like have the
do it right now.
Yeah, exactly. But it's fun. It's super. It's like just a super easy way to spin up full stack web apps, whether you are building something new or scaffolding out a landing page or whatever have you. We recently just rolled out native mobile app support with Expos. You can like prompt native mobile apps. That one is also wild to test out. So anyway, so that's kind of the background on me and like Bolt and Stackblitz. And I imagine if folks here are like developers, we've been doing stuff in the development space for a while. So you might have ran across Stackblitz, which is a web-based IDE. But yeah, so I think with that, I will hand it over to Kenneth to introduce himself.
Well, I'm excited to be here. This is a great group of people. I'm Kenneth, a partner at AlleyCorp, a venture fund in New York. Before jumping to the dark side of venture, I spent a lot of years in various capacities building developer tools like VS Code. I was in the early VS Code team, getting that off the ground. I was becoming market leaders back then. I used to work at Stripe building our developer platform. And really, more recently, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about agent experience as we are going through this transition shift in our industry of like customer experience, developer experience, and now agent experience. So I'm spending my time thinking and thinking about what's next and working with founders building the next piece of info we need.
Oh man, I mean, we again, Kenneth, traversed like ships in the night. I was at GitHub, you were at VS Code, we had code spaces. Man, don't you love a developer tool and platform? But don't you even love the idea of having that coding assistance or more, just doing that amazing grunt work for you? I know I do. But as we dive into this conversation, I want to take a short little poll for all y'all out there listening to this webinar. We have a little section on your screen that says chat message, poll, and Q&A. And I'd like to ask you, how prepared are you for agent experience? Very prepared, somewhat prepared, or what the heck is agent experience? Or up in the Pacific Northwest, we call it axe. We like to do some axe throwing, but this is not axe throwing. This is agent experiencing. We got very prepared. I want to talk to you. Tell me what you did so I know, so I'm prepared. Somewhat prepared. I'm going to be honest. I'm feeling that way because, man, this stuff is moving so fast, and Eric keeps adding stuff, and so does Matt. And every day I log in, it's something new. Oh, and then we got a big one here. Look at this. And this is great. What the heck is AX? Is it an axe, a physical device to cut trees? No, it's agent experience, just like the term coined in 2011 by Jeremiah Lee, one of my co-workers. Developer experience is a similar idea and thought process on how we create technology for agents that are operated by, yes, us developers, and how those two experiences can come together. But as we fill out this poll, let's get back into this discussion. So Matt Biilmann, you coined this term, agent experience, and I think it's still fairly new out in the industry, obviously so. Some of us are somewhat comfortable. Some of us are already experts. Hello. Kenneth, I think you got some people to talk to since you're a partner and you invest. Go hit those people up. But Matt Biilmann, please tell us a little bit more about what agent experience actually means, what it does, and how we are approaching this with great partners like Stackblitz, Bolt, and others.
Yeah, I think about AX or agent experience really as a discipline, right? Like in a similar way that UX or user experience or DX or developer experience is a discipline, right? Like it's not a thing you build or something. It's something you practice in many ways, right? Like and part of my point when I coined the term was that one of the things that's really so revolutionary about what LLMs can do now, it's not just that they can like create an image for it or they can like you can prompt them and they give you a part of code. It's that they can start acting as agents in the world, right? Like we suddenly have computers that are not just doing what we programmed them to do, but are starting to like be agents that that takes our intent to do something and then tries to figure out how to do it for us, right? Like and they start interacting with the world in different ways. If it's a self-driving car, it has cameras and it drives around, right? Like, but in the majority of cases, they interact in the world through the digital world, right? Like through software and through the internet and through the web and through the products and channels that allows that. And back in '93, Don Norman from the Nelson Institute, he coined this term user experience to really say like user experience as contrast to just like user interface design or something like that, right? Like to really say, what is the holistic experience of a user that's trying to do something with your product, right? Like from back then reading the physical manual to opening the box to like installing it to trying to do something, right? Like, and later on in 2011, Jeremiah, who also worked with Dana actually, Jeremiah Lee coined the term developer experience in a similar way of saying like we now have a core product. And then we have these developers that have access to SDKs or toolkits or APIs that can extend that product, or we have platforms that developers can build stuff with. And the degree to which those developers have a great holistic experience when they're trying to do that will determine which of those platforms becomes more successful or less successful, right? Like, so a lot of us started really embracing this discipline of developer experience, sort of really saying it's not enough that our product can that a developer can somehow make our product do something. It's really important if it's frictionless and simple, and if the holistic process of understanding our documentation and using our CLI tools and interacting with our SDKs is good enough to differentiate our products from other products in the market and get greater like amounts of developers building around us, right? Like, and as I said in my intro, when I started Netlify, our whole goal was kind of making the developer experience of building websites, web applications, web stores with this Jamstack architecture so good that developers would start preferring that architecture, and we would start getting a better web as a result. But now when computers are starting to have agency and they're starting to do stuff with our products that are not strictly just scripted, it's not just a developer that said like, do this API call at 2:00 in the morning, right? Like it's a human asking an agent to build me a website or go figure out why my order from Amazon hasn't arrived yet, right? Like stuff like that. Then suddenly we get a new persona that's interacting with our products and that can sort of have a good or bad experience, right? Like you can see sometimes you try to get an agent to do something with a product and it fails miserably and gets confused and go into a weird loop. And other times you ask an agent to do something with a product and it just really works, right? Like, and we started at Netlify really making it a core part of our development strategy to say, what do we need to do to make the agent experience of Netlify best in class? What do we need to make it as easy as possible for humans using agents to be successful with Netlify, and how do those interactive paradigms look like? How do the off flows look like? How does it affect our core platform primitives? Are there things that should change there? What are the kind of frameworks and front end tooling that's going to be really well suited to that? And on the other aspect of it, when our customers build web apps or build e-commerce stores or build marketing sites, how can we also then help them build better agent experience on the web in general? Again, to make sure both that when we ask agents to help us develop products, the web stays a really competitive and amazing platform for agents to build on. And those products, if they are built on the web, we should make sure that they have great agent experience, so the open web stays vibrant and relevant, and so we can keep this open, federated, non-walled garden as a platform strong and healthy.
Oh man, Matt, I think on this panel, we all agree with that, especially because, some of us have traversed in open source ourselves, and I love the power of the collective community coming together to change the world. And that's really what we're talking about when we understand more deeply of how we can change these workflows, to really think about this new landscape of how agents will interact and make decisions on our behalf. And us control freak humans want to make sure that there's some guardrails in place, but also that we're not just creating a whole bunch of illusions or hallucinations or things that just take away this promise of being more productive, being able to ship faster, and being able to just change the world by our ideas. And besides, getting more tokens, which, hello, Eric, the people want the tokens, hello. But no, I want the tokens. I want all the tokens too, y'all. But Eric, you're living and breathing this, man. You are on the other side. You are a pioneer. You're creating these agents. And I can imagine if they could speak in human languages, which they can, go figure, they'd be like, make it better, just like our developers, right? How can we make it better? But how are you approaching this with the work that you're doing to really enable this new way of building?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is it's a pretty early, this is probably the first webinar that's ever been done on this topic, right? So just to show how early this is, So yeah, I think and for Stackblitz as a company, we were comparatively late to the AI game compared to a lot of others. For a good reason. We waited until we had conviction that AI models have gotten to a point where you could really build tools that where when you put $1 in, you can tangibly get real, very obvious value back out. And that's kind of what's happened with Bolt. And since Sonnet 3.5 came out. And so I think a lot of the challenge is, there's kind of multiple sets where it's end user facing challenges around how to best use these tools, right? There's also just, challenges around integrating with existing providers. And I think this is a key area where Netlify has done a very good job, because we wanted to have deployment integration. And, Matt had invented this anonymous deploy flow for Netlify years ago. And it's just a great end user experience, generally speaking, but especially in the context of AI enabled tools, I think us and a lot of the other AI agents in the space have adopted Netlify because of how great this integration is and how easy it is to plug in with the agentic workflows we're doing. And so I think that's with as Bolt's popularity has kind of risen, a lot of other companies, whether they're doing the company that does email sending or databases or whatever, it's I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how do we kind of plug into, these agents in a better way. I think generally speaking, the answer is just how can you make it insanely easy to spin these sorts of resources up and plug them into the agent, and having a very minimal sort of API surface. Because I think the big limitation with a lot of this stuff is context windows of LLMs are pretty small. And so if you have a good example is, the Netlify example actually is a great one, where it's, one endpoint that you hit doesn't even require basically an authenticated user to use, and you have a deployment. It just like doesn't get simpler than that, and that completely fits within the context window of an agent or whatever. And like another example of this would be like Supabase, where instead of like having to teach the agent how to do proper Postgres connections and like all this stuff you would have to do manually, whereas like Supabase has client APIs for doing auth and it's way easier conceptually for Bolt's agent to understand how to use Supabase versus using Postgres directly, right? So that's just kind of like those are the things, just some very like tangible, real aspects of like from a technical implementation what matters, and then from an end user perspective, you want to deliver an experience that just works, right? It's like simple and delightful to use, and those are kind of like on the same spectrum, right? Like the Netlify integration with deployments, like it's a one API call, one click thing. From a technical point of view, very easy for an agent to understand and perform. From a user point of view, magic, right? Happens in like a second, and you have a live website. So anyway, so I think it's like you really want to connect those dots, and then you get this like crazy agentic experience, that I think people are falling in love with and want to see more of.
I can agree more. And I think like, what's really interesting is the same outcomes we've wanted since like, I've been in this for a hot minute, longer than you were squatting in the AOL offices. And I've been thinking about this problem almost as long as Kenneth. I think me and him may be tied on thinking about the problems that developers face. But the reality is like we want to unlock the ability for developers to be creative. And these tools and these experience allow us to really move at light speed. And, the rise of IDEs, VS Code, I mean, I was an Eclipse user and well beyond before that. It was the same thing that we wanted, was a great experience so that you could unlock the things that really matter to the human experience by ensuring that we're giving these builders the ability to just fly. And that's what we're doing collectively. And Kenneth, you're out there, you're a partner, you're talking to startups, to inventors, to the next pioneers like Eric and Matt about what this will be in the future, and you've had a history like myself, really deeply thinking about the developer experience with the things we've built in the past. How are you seeing this emerge through your lens and talking about these new tool sets, right? Eric has come out and says, we just got to continue to make it easy. There's all these things that we can do. Matt has already proven through the history of Netlify of that thinking set of deployment shouldn't be a burden. Build shouldn't be hard. Environmental variables still hard. Thank goodness we have agents for that. But Kenneth, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? And where do you really see agent experience going as we really fine tune what our modern tool set will be for developing these experiences?
Yeah, I see a lot of different things, but I definitely seeing what Matt and Erica are building and putting out there and really enabling both developers and non-technical people to build more software. I think it's pretty clear that like my thesis for the past few years has been we are moving to a world where 80% of all code in the world will be generated with an agent or an LLM. And I think on the agent side of things, I think we as an industry are finally reaching a moment where agents are starting to work. I think we have been in a world before reasoning models where the agentic promise hasn't really worked, but now we're starting to see reasoning getting unlocked. We're seeing tool calling starting to work, and I think the next frontier is exactly what Matt is talking about with agent experience. As any service provider in a few years from now will have to think about agents as a first-class consumer of their products. And I think up until this point, agents has mostly been emulating a human user by spinning up a headless browser or maybe do raw API requests. But as we kind of move into a world where teams, all of us are gonna be working with agents that we're gonna have in our pocket. We're gonna use specialized agents like Bolt to help us build websites. We're gonna have agents helping us doing all other parts of our job. The reality is that all of these agents need to interact with the rest of the world. So really, as you're kind of building new products in this agentic future, every service provider have to think about how am I build a great experience for the web? How am I going to build a great experience for mobile? But also how am I going to build a great agent experience? And I think in many ways, the best comparison I have is I feel like this is a similar moment of us going through the desktop to mobile area. That when we all were building desktop experiences and we suddenly got our iPhones, etc., we were just loading on like our desktop experience on the mobile devices. But then we quickly realized that we had to build a bespoke mobile experience because it was a new form factor. And I think the same thing will kind of happen now, that every service provider will have to think about what is that bespoke agent experience, because the reality is that there's a difference between a human and an agent. Like Matt and Eric touch upon like identity, authentication, onboarding, documentation, all these aspects, and how you make sure that when an agent is consuming whatever you're providing, can actually have a great experience getting started using your product.
Definitely, definitely.
I have an interesting, like, a small example of that from, like, I shared in the chat that I built my blog with Bolt, right? Like, and it was a great experience. It was really, my mind is kind of blown already by how far the agents have already come in terms of code generation, and there's no doubt that this is the worst they'll ever be at code generation, right? Like, so I agree with Kenneth, right? Like, I think all developers 5 years from now will be using agents to work on their code and with their projects and so on, right? Like, I can't see us looking back 5 years from now and saying, oh, that was just a fad. We're all back to writing TypeScript by hand with the same front-end frameworks we do today. Like, it's going to change everything, right? Like, and there are sort of real interesting differences all over the place between what works for developer experience and what works for agent experience. And there was like sort of one small example I had to fix when I launched my blog, and someone on Twitter asked, hey, can you add an email sign up form? I want to give you my email so I can get notified when you write any blog post. And I asked Bolt, like, write me a form so I can get email subscriptions. And Bolt knew about Netlify forms. So it just like wrote we have this form feature where you can just write an HTML form and you can annotate it with like a Netlify attribute, and then we'll give it a little backend and it'll just work, right? Like, and Bolt did all of that work completely correctly. And I deployed the site and I went and it didn't work. And the reason is that when we built the developer experience around it, the way a developer will discover that they can add this Netlify attribute is either by going to our docs or inside our UI, there'll be like a forms tag, and you can read the instructions to get started. And those instructions will say the first step is that in Netlify's UI, you have to enable form detection. So we actually look for that tag, right? Like, and for a developer, that's like, because we know that's the flow of a developer, right? Like, go into our UI and see that what you have to do, or you discover that you can do this at all by reading the docs and you see you have to do that. That's never been a problem, right? Like, but obviously when the agent writes the form for you, you have never been exposed as a developer to any of those interfaces, right? Like, you haven't seen that you have to enable it, right? Like, and I'm the founder of Netlify, so I kind of wrote that feature back in the day, and I know I have to enable it, right? Like, so fine, right? Like, but I could immediately see, okay, none of the normal Bolt users that don't have that inside knowledge would have any chance of figuring out that you had to enable a form, because it was the agent that wrote it for them, right? Like, so we had to go in and make sure that when Bolt adds a Netlify form, we automatically detect it, and you don't have to enable it, because otherwise the agent experience would be bad, right? Like, and it's sort of a small example, but I think it's a good example of how things change in the ways like that we need to be really conscious on, and the reason we need to have an actual like agent experience discipline on our teams and really test with these tools and think through those flows, because agents are different with developers, and you suddenly, in general, whether it's code-gen agents or other agents, have these new flows where there's both a human involved and an agent doing stuff with your product on behalf of that human.
Yeah, definitely.
And Eric, I believe like what some of the things we're seeing in the industry is really fueled by a lot of the work you all are doing on Bolt, where you as an agent are driving a lot of usage of new infrastructure providers. At least that's kind of what I'm seeing from my vantage point, is that we are now seeing agents that developers are using are driving adoptions of like email sending infrastructure, database providers, etc. I'm curious, how does things look from your vantage point as you're kind of building Bolt and enabling all these integrations to work?
Yeah, totally. I think that is definitely the case, and I think from our perspective, I mean, like kind of what's going on here is that there's these agents are opening up a market that previously was not the previous would have never really been adopting developer-oriented tools, right? You're talking about people that I would say like are generally not developers, so I think like entrepreneurs, PMs, designers, etc. These folks are now able to actually build real software, right? Using Bolt and things like Bolt or whatever. And obviously, like, as any developer knows, like if you're building a full stack app, you're going to need hosting, you're going to need a database, you're going to need a way to send emails. And so when they say, hey, my full stack app needs to send emails, the agent's going to recommend something, right? And but so I think that's kind of what is I think the reason that we're seeing larger numbers than ever before in developer tools from these agentic workflows. It's like agents are cool, and then the developers are certainly adopting them, but it's actually a TAM expander of the people that can use these things. And so there's actually the important kind of distinction there is that from a user experience point of view, you need to design this stuff in mind then with people that are not familiar with how the intricacies of developer tools and integrations and whatever work, right? And so that is a key area for us, like over the next quarter or whatever. We're going to be doing, some even deeper integrations where you don't have to go to the Netlify dashboard necessarily to like get certain things spun up or whatever have you, right? And with like databases and So I think there's kind of like a convergence, and even for like experienced developers, like folks have better things to do than like go and flip toggles in configuration. If you can like tell the agent to do stuff and it just does it, like what Matt was saying around like flip on the form thing, like flip on the thing that scans for the tag. I don't know, just do it, right? I don't care.
Yeah.
As a developer, it's like it's a waste of my brain CPU cycles. Let a GPU do it for me, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
So, but anyways, so I think that's kind of the interesting thing, and so you kind of end up like I guess the product philosophy we have around this, because we're trying to like build a tool that's great for developers where you can have full control over the things you normally would, but you're also trying to build it where non-developers can use it really successfully and triage and debug it, whatever. So to me, it's kind of like you're building a power drill where, like my mom used a power drill to put up my baby gate like a month or two ago, right? And she's like 73, right? And I would say most American homes like probably have like a power drill. There's certainly some high percentage, right? But if you drive by a construction site of like actual professionals whose entire job is to be masters of this craft, right? They are using the same DeWalt power drill that my mom used. And so I kind of look at agents and tooling like that, where, I think there's a nice fine line. And by the way, there's going to be products that fall on either side of this too, right? But if you're, I think in the case of Bolt, at least, we're trying to build for both audiences here where, to the degree that you are a beginner, you can still use this thing with minimal, education required. And the more you learn, it's still going to be the same tool, and you're using it in different ways with different drill bits or whatever, right? And so that's kind of been our perspective to like, okay, what types of experiences do we want to build? Because both of these sides are important, and there's kind of like this middle line that we want.
Yeah, definitely.
No, just thinking out loud here. I think there's something very interesting here in terms of like, Matt, what you were riffing on before with how we, for the past, like, I would say 15 years of building these like bespoke developer experiences, making sure the onboarding is great. And I definitely think like, as you're going to think about the frontier here, how to make sure that when an agent is consuming your primitives in your platform, that they have a great onboarding experience. If I think back in some of my time, what we did on the Stripe side of things, like we spent a lot of time like agonizing over like how API keys were looking, that you could easily like test mode and live mode and making it even
Yeah.
easy copy pastable. Like we need kind of new sign up flows or token exchanges to enable an agent to easily discover a new service if it's getting recommended, sign up as a service provider. You want to make sure that you have the right permissioning so an agent doesn't run amok and do silly things. But also you have audit trail. There's all these things of treating an agent as a new bespoke consumer of whatever you're building. But I think that's a lot of the baseline assumptions around how you build a great developer tools product, like how you need to have great docs, you need to have an SDK. Some of these things are being frankly like rewritten right now. You actually might not need an SDK. It's more important you have a well-defined API because the agent can spin up an environment and write its own SDK. But if you have like weird edge cases that the system cannot reason about, that might be another failure mode you need to optimize for. Or like documentation. We've all been like spending a lot of years of our life writing amazing integration guides for all these to hyper personalize all these stacks. But now like an agent can just reason about the whole code base, can reason about all the knowledge available and then figure things out themselves. So I think that like this is a really exciting time where the traditional kind of hat we've been and tools and leverages we've been applying is basically up for grabs. But also to your point, like there's a net new audience that are going to be using all of the tools that we all built, right?
And that way, Eric, I'm kind of really curious if you've seen, like one thing that interests me is like the front end libraries and front end tools and ways we build front end applications. Are you also seeing differences between like what's been successful from a DX standpoint and what works really well for an agent? Are you seeing like different frameworks that are like the most popular right now being better for agents? Are you seeing like different approaches to libraries working better for agents than what might be most popular for developers?
Yeah,
like,
totally. Sorry. Go ahead. I don't know who the question was directed at. Go ahead, Kenneth. You go first. I feel bad. I cut you off.
I'm going to start and then please jump in. I'm very curious on what you see on the Bolt side. This is like just a meta comment. I actually think this is a very interesting point in time where it's actually going to be much harder for new frameworks, new authoring abstractions to get momentum, because an LLM is like trained on everything that is out there right now, and you basically see the generalized like middle of like, so it's very easy for like, it's really great for Claude to write React or use whatever that is the most popular abstraction right now at the moment that the model was trained. So I actually think of introducing new DSLs and new ways of doing things is actually going to be incredibly hard because the model won't understand how to do these things really well. And I actually think that this poses both an opportunity to us like leveraging those capabilities, but it also introduces the barrier of new abstractions to being introduced. But I think that this like very underleveraged things about LLMs is that LLMs doesn't get tired, like in the sense that you can deploy LLMs and agents and ask them to write tests. And as a developer, I hate writing tests, right? You can just ask like Cursor or like Bolt or anyone else just to write the goddamn test and get that done, and you can do it in parallel. So there's also a lot of power here into how we're thinking about our various workflows that we can start leveraging in new ways. Anyways, off to you, Eric.
No, you made an excellent point, and so there's an interesting like maybe caveat to that, which is where I was going to go. Around to and Matt's question was like, are we seeing like certain tools, frameworks, kind of et cetera, work well versus others? And so what Kenneth says is 100% true. The most popular things, it's kind of like Monopoly. Like once you like own like a critical mass of properties that you're just like guaranteed to be the winner, right? It's kind of like that, where it's like, these things. And I think like a clear one, React is like the most obvious example. Like React was winning. It doesn't appear, like that's going to be changing anytime soon because the LLMs are just incredibly good at writing React code, right? Interesting thing though is that LLMs tend to have the same sort of cognitive limits that a human does, in the sense that like if you're dealing with a tool or a framework that is extremely complicated, that has had a lot of different APIs over the years and and so if you're training data on this thing, it's like things that were in previous versions might not be the things that are needed now, and you need a certain configuration to do it this way versus that way. And so in the web development world, the one that I was surprised to see that really struggles, considering, again, like if you kind of look at who has a lot of critical mass and therefore would be really well positioned to ride the LLM wave. Next.js actually, we're having to actually point people away from Next.js in Bolt because the experience that we get back from the LLMs is so bad. And the reason is that the LLMs are mixing up APIs that would have worked in 2 versions ago, don't work now, or like some configuration's not there, and that's not a knock on, I'm not knocking Next.js for the sake of it or whatever, but it's really actually like, it's kind of like people want to use this on Bolt. It's very frustrating to us because it's like, we're going to have to do fine tuning or something to like manually to sort this stuff out. If we want to go and do that. Whereas when you look, if you look at build tooling that's working insanely well, it's Vite. Vite is just destroying it. Like Vite was already growing on a crazy clip before. All of these LLMs are insanely good at punching out Vite applications. Reason being, you look at the configuration of a Vite project, it's like the simplest thing in the world compared to like a Webpack config. It's like, that might as well be binary. You're trying to read into Webpack config, right? And so that same thing kind of applies to LLMs as far as their ability to punch out reliable code and configuration that's going to work, that's not going to run into a bajillion problems. And so I think that, again, like coming back to, I think a core thing that I've kind of spoken to here is like simplicity of the technology and the interfaces to it. And therefore, and like from a developer experience perspective, if it is simple, if it is clear, that is you're going to end up with a much better result when LLMs train on this stuff and the result that they can punch out. And that's kind of exactly what we're seeing. So it's kind of like, yes, if you already have a lot of traction, the LLMs are going to do a much better job out of the box. But also, you have to take developer experience extremely seriously, in the sense of, especially ways where, code is, these things are being trained on the code being written, where like that matters more than ever, I guess, right? Like before it was like maybe annoying for developers and you kind of had these people that would specialize on these like things for like years or decades. But now it's like, okay, well, if you really want durability and growth into the future, you really have to take that seriously. So in a sense, it's like, it's just kind of, it's multiplying, I guess, what we've seen happen over the decades past, right? But it's happening in a much shorter time frame and maybe higher multiples,
It seems like that point, back to your earlier points around context, right? Like it's really around like for a developer having like very extensive sets of docs and so on are fine, right? Like for these tools, if they have small, well-defined primitives that fits in a context, it might be better or easier. And like one thing that really fascinated me, and I haven't really had a chance yet to hear more from them directly, right? Like, but one of the developers at Breaks had this whole Twitter thread around how they intentionally optimized like their front-end architecture to be more LLM friendly, like just to make sure that their developers could zero-shot more things with agents when working on the code base. And it's just like interesting to see things like removing hooks from the code because they kind of hide what's going on and requires looking at more files to understand and just getting it into one longer component file, not like because it's easier for an LLM. And then in their case, interesting to see like adopting Relay, which is a GraphQL a state management library, right? Like that never really got that popular for its developer experience, right? Because it was kind of hard for developers to grok the whole mental model around it, I think, and how to set it up. But just interesting to see that they found that like because it sort of really allows you to write these like one component files with all the state management just being like declarative where you write the calls to the state, that worked really well for LLMs in a way that their previous architecture didn't, right? Like, so I think while it's true that there's some level of popularity that creates a stickiness to the LLMs, I also think there's a lot of opportunities to really think about the agent experience of the libraries and tools we build to make things that are actually like more prone to work with like one single prompt and a simple context.
Absolutely, and I think like we're definitely like hitting the upper bounds of the capabilities of the model, but of the models, and like you zero optimizing for like single files because it's easier to index, etc. But there's just a part of me that is like, with this capability unlock curve we've been on for the past, like, let's say like 12 months, will this continue in terms of, will our models be better at indexing larger code bases, understanding, like navigating structures, etc. But yeah, like it's definitely interesting if you think about like what are kind of the new base level requirements for like you building a great agent experience. And I just thought, like, Eric, I think you were touching upon like developer experience really being an enabler to agent experience. And I think that's really the foundation here, is that your primitives and what you're providing to developers are still like the layer below that is now being consumed in a new context. And I think that's really important just to keep in mind, is that a lot of what you're already out there is going to be critical for the next like generation of experiences you're going to build, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that. I mean, I come back to thinking about this, the no code, low code hype that happened, and then also finding that sweet middle ground. And that's something we're going to have to continue to find. There's not going to be just developers. There's going to be all the people within the development flywheel being able to participate, which I think at the end experience is going to be a lot better. We think of that old web comment of the tire swing. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And you give it to an engineer, and now it's just absolutely bonkers. You know, LLMs and agents are going to choose the clearest path and cleanest path. And I do think it is a question, what's going to matter before may not matter in the future, and how can we keep it simple? But y'all, we got a ton of questions coming in. And if you didn't see, there is a Q&A section. Please go vote for your favorite. I will do my best to answer, to shoot out the questions and get some answers from this fine panel. And if we don't get to them all, don't you worry. We have these things recorded. We will come back at you. I heard that Matt Biilmann said in between not sleeping, he just had a baby. He has all the time in the world to go answer your questions. We'll make sure to get those out there back to the community. But with that being said, I'm going to give you all a chance to come and chime in here. And this is a good one. And it's coming from Taylor, who, by the way, is bragging in the chat that they went to Bolt during this and created a site and already got some salespeople. Come on, yuck, yuck, yuck. But no, in all seriousness, it is that easy. But what Taylor wants to know is, like, what can developers do to get ready for this? How can we upskill? What can we train? An app. Sorry, Taylor. My apologies. He built an app. But Taylor wants to know, what can we do for developers? What should developers be thinking of to upskill, to get ready for the AI, AX revolution? And where do we see developers really intersecting with this ability? We've talked about, other participants in the developer development lifecycle. We've talked about even non-technical users being able to go create. But what do our amazing developers really need to be prepared for in this future? What are some thoughts there? I'll kick it over to you, Matt.
So I think one of the general things that's always been true about development is that your tools, like the tools that were available when I started Netlify 10 years ago for building web apps, were just completely different most people are using today, right? Like Next.js, Astro, Remix, none of those were at all, right? Like React looked very different in its infancy. Golang was barely a thing in then. Rust wasn't a thing in the industry back then, right? Like essentially all of those have changed in those 10 years in the day-to-day work, right? Building layers of abstraction that's like a step higher in our stack, right? Like we started a long time ago as a developer, you had to basically know about like where your servers and your packs were stacked, right? Like, and you wrote code like at that level, right? Like, and then we've kept moving stack upwards. Links will be a continuation of that, right? Abstraction upwards. You will have to constantly learn new tools, but I would say that's just a given of being a developer. Right? Constantly learns new tools. Like you'll be in trouble no matter what, you would also have been in trouble 10 years ago, right? Like, and I think embracing LLMs as you work on code, setting yourself challenges to like, how can it be faster at doing something with LLMs? That's going to be really important, because it's also very clear that these agents, you don't just tell them like, hey, go build this whole thing. There's a real skill set that you can start building up on how to actually use them.
Oh, no,
So yeah,
Matt, we are getting some.
That would be my.
Well, thank you. I think we heard 70% of that. It was an eloquent, amazing answer. Your internet's cutting out a little bit. We got some audio issues coming in. I don't know if it's because all the Nest cams in the house for making sure that new bundle of joy is yours all right while you spend some time with us. But just a little note there. We'll get that back. Hey, AI censoring, Matt. Y'all are so funny. I mean, let's summarize this. As a developer, you're constantly learning. There's nothing that's changed. We're going to continue to utilize these tool sets, these workflows. I personally don't think the development practice is going anywhere. I just think we're getting this opportunity to continue to be better and do better things and spend that time. And I know a lot of y'all hear that over and over, but it's true. I mean, I've been in this industry over 25 years and I've had to learn everything, and I do a lot of things really bad. I mean, like, who's gone from Java to Go to Rust to Python, well, back to Python, but here we are. And now we're in this great new world, and it's just going to continue to get exciting. And I think there's still a lot of room for growth and for developer mindset, because again, this is the beginning. This is actually the first webinar that's actually even touching this. So we got a lot of awesome time ahead of us to continue to hone our crafts. Now, I know we don't got a lot of time, so I'm going to keep digging into these questions, y'all. Matt, maybe your internet's going to come back to us, but you can pantomime your answers. That's something that an agent can't do yet, Eric. Go write that one down for your future roadmap, okay? Visual coding prompts, like build me this. But no, seriously. So let's get in here. So what are the opinions on the Claude Code and Anthropic venturing into code generation? Ooh, do we have any opinions about that? I mean, I think it's cool, but Kenneth, what are your thoughts and opinions about Claude Code and Anthropic venturing into this space?
I think it's exciting to see a model provider kind of like dog fooding his own models and it basically battle testing kind of their own things. I definitely think like there's like generally in our ecosystem, we want to see as many tools as possible, and we just want to see as many people kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible. So seeing like, Cursor, Devon, Bolt, all them Aider, like seeing what Cloud Code is doing, it's really great. But I definitely think that there's also a room and a place for everyone in this ecosystem. And I definitely think developers tend to gravitate towards tools built by people who are really passionate about one piece and really owning that, and then really just iterating on that experience. But I think this is one of the most exciting times, and having built VS Code and a bunch of other things, like I think these years we're seeing more innovation when it comes to developer tools, and what frankly we have seen for the past many years. And I do think we are in a really exciting times where we're really redefining what it means to write software. And I think we should just encourage everyone to kind of experiment and build new tools.
Couldn't agree more. Get out there and build. Get out there and go for it. Try these platforms. Help give us that feedback. You won't know until you go and try and learn. And that's how we're going to make it better. Well, we're going to be wrapping soon, but I'm going to sneak in one more question for you. And then I want to get some hot takes from this panel before we go. And I'm going to share a little call to action, because you can't come to a webinar without doing something. Eric, we got one for you coming from Sasha. What is the best advice when it comes to prompting on Bolt.new? I would say cats in every prompt, but they didn't ask me, and I think cats are still hot. But Eric, what are some good pro tips on using your platform that the people want to know?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we actually have a docs page on this. If you go to support.bolt.new, I believe it is. Let me double check. That's the correct, support.bolt.new. You go there. If you search like prompting, we have a whole page on this. But generally speaking, the interesting thing that we have found, the folks that are like most successful with prompting Bolt, it's very similar to the skill set that a PM will use for instructing a developer. And so if anyone here is a PM, congratulations, your skill set is a superpower at making products quickly with agents like Bolt. If you have not had to manage developers before, typically it comes in the form of like making a PRD, breaking things down into tasks. You can't expect good results for something that's sufficiently complicated. You're not going to just be able to put in something zero shot and say make me a CRM that has Stripe billing in it and da 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 da. You're looking at a couple of prompts. You want to kind of split apart those tasks individually. But this is like a whole field and domain, by the way. Like it's not something where you can kind of there's some magic set of words I can say here that'll kind of give you everything you need to know. It's people are pushing the limits of these tools and these LLMs and figuring out new ways to better control them and better get the output that they're looking for. So I would we have a Discord community. If you go to discord.gg/Stackblitz, there people are constantly in there sharing prompts of what works, what doesn't, etc. And it's fun because it's just very collaborative and you get to meet some cool people. So anyways, that'd be my recommendation. Take a look at the docs we have. You experiment on your own, chat with other folks that are doing these things, and I think with those sorts of skill sets, you can kind of master it and really be able to punch out great stuff.
Awesome.
In a follow-up, I just wanted to ask you, what's the most mind-blowing thing you've seen someone manage to build with Bolt?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a couple. I mean, there's this guy on Twitter, his name's Ian. I mean, he's made these XR, like virtual reality games and so stuff. Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's just he's made some unbelievable, mind-blowing stuff. I'm like, you made this with Bolt, right? He made an entire 3D graphics editor with Bolt. So it's just not even just having it build a 3D game. It's the thing to build the games, right? But I mean, outside of that, I mean, people have built, in the first couple of weeks, people built actual full stack. There was a CRM that with Stripe billing and AI integrated with it launched on week 3 or something after we had launched, and making money and actually is a real startup, right? So that blew our minds, continues to blow our minds, right? And the sky is really the limit, of what you can do with these things. And it's just, with the latest model upgrades landing, it just keeps getting better and better. You can build more and more things. So yes, that's that's just a sliver of the stuff that we see,
Oh man, so get out there and share what you're building. There's no better way to learn and to help the community and all of us participate by doing and trying. And I'm really happy that some of y'all took that call to action during this and started building some apps and websites. I know I like to do it on the fly as a party trick. I was at a show and I made a bingo card of all the Portland hipsters I saw live on Bolt, and people's minds were blown. I really did that. I'll show you my bingo card, Eric. It was really funny. A lot of camo hats, I'll tell you that one. But with that being said, I wanted to thank you all for joining, and thank you, Kenneth, Eric, Matt, for coming and talking to the community on, I think, the first ever AX webinar. And thank you all for letting me come bring some levity and be your host. With that being said, you're probably asking yourself, Dana, and if you're not, you should, how can I get involved? Well, don't you worry. I got you. There are so many things that you can do to participate in this new world besides sharing, commenting, communicating, collaborating, and get involved. Come visit the agentexperience.ax page and explore, share some insights and some AX practices. Talk about how you're extending your platforms, your workflows, your tools, and getting ready for the AI revolution. You can join the discussions here. You can follow Netlify. You can follow Stackblitz. You can follow all of us for more hotness. And we want to hear and learn from you more. With that being said, there's also a startup that will be happening in San Francisco at the Netlify headquarters with Maestro and Electric SQL to talk about more cool stuff in this space. But with that being said, again, I want to thank you for joining us. And if we didn't get to your question, and I know we didn't, because boy, howdy, do us nerds like talking about our stuff, we're going to get to it after this call. We'll be sure to drop more insights and commentary regarding agent experience and the agentic workflow and how you are going to be a part of that, because you are. We are here and we are going to continue to build. I want to thank you again for joining us. And with that being said, have a great, wonderful Baby Friday, everybody out there. And I hope to see you on the internet soon. Thanks, y'all.